a regional or global economic and military power, bracketed within the BRIC group, denoting Brazil, Russia, China, India. The four emerging economic powerhouses to shape the new world. It is ironic that India is the only country which not only lacks substantial military aviation capability, but is almost next to zero in the civil aviation industry. Fortunately, developments in the two main areas are converging, which if pursued with the right vigor and purposefulness, could lead India to come out of this morass. First is the India establishment's realization that it cannot rely solely on the public sector to deliver the goods, and that it has to open up the defense industry to the private sector as well. Here I mean not only the defense but the civil aviation industry as well. The second is the offset policy. We could bring in the required investment in the sector from foreign resources if pursued properly. As you know, India did open up its defense industry to the private sector for the first time at the turn of the millennium. However, while the government showed boldness by allowing up to 100% Indian private sector participation and limited the foreign companies' participation to only 26% through FDI, which persists till today. Therefore, while opening up the Indian defense industry in 2001 was considered to be a revolutionary step, it did not result in any significant capability enhancement. The net result was that although between 2004 and 2009, India reportedly spent rupees 1,37,496 crore rupees, that amounting to almost $30 billion, on capital acquisitions, majority of them from abroad. The FDI content remained at a paltry sum of just a few hundred crores rupees. The question that looms large is that with the offset clause now coming, will the foreign OEMs be able to discharge their offset commitments in a meaningful manner? But first, what are the Indian establishment's concerns with regard to further liberalizing the private sector participation and the FDI regime in the defense sector, which could incidentally be applied in the public sector as well? The major reason for political bureaucratic reluctance in encouraging the private sector into defense production and welcoming the FDI in the sector is on account of its concern for the survivability of the large number of DPSUs, that is the defense public sector units, and the OFs, that is the ordnance factories, which it is feared would succumb in the face of competition from the private sector. Ladies and gentlemen, it is argued that while the concerns of the Indian establishment would have been of serious nature in the world of yesterday, these can be easily managed in today's world of globalization and interdependence. Unlike in the past, where the manufacture of defense equipment was concentrated among a few selected nations only, this capability is much more dispersed today. Therefore, the fear of getting sucked into a relationship of exclusive dependence with regard to a particular foreign country for capital and technology may be ill-founded in the present-day scenario. In addition, with appropriate laws and terms and conditions for manufacturing defense equipment by foreign investors, the Indian government can exercise a meaningful and more effective control on the production and sale mechanism of a company which is located in India when compared to a company which is located overseas. Raising the FDI limits to the levels that satisfy foreign investors. They normally say on the face of it that they're quite happy with 26%, but we all know that that is not the case in the real sense of it. We know that since independence, India has been buying off-the-shelf military hardware from foreign companies. With foreign companies having their physical presence in India and subject to Indian laws, the country's interests will be served much better, especially in view of sustained supply and billions of critical defense equipment, even at the worst of times. The good news is that even with the present impediments in the terms of FDI limitations, a large number of foreign OEMs are going into joint ventures with Indian companies. A shining example, of course, would be the Tata Group itself. I need not go into details. We all know what they are getting into. Therefore, I will come to the final analysis, which is that there is certainly a case for raising the FDI in the defense sector from the meager 26% to much higher levels. The new level need not be restricted to only 49% as advocated by some quarters. The government could exercise its judgment on a case-by-case basis to 74% or even up to 100% to best serve the needs and interests of the country. Establishing a sound manufacturing sector with the help of foreign investors would not only help in airplanes and components manufacturing, but also lead to the country to finally get into the global export market as well. This would also give a boost to the establishment of a defense ancillary sector in the country. It would also be in consonance with the Honorable Defense Minister's statement, which is oft repeated. We want to strengthen defense industry, and that India needs a strong defense industry base. In other words, it would not only help in saving the valuable foreign exchange, which would have otherwise been spent on import of defense equipment, but may also help in earning extra foreign exchange through export of surplus capacity. Truly a win-win situation. I shall close my presentation with that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David, for the very comprehensive presentation. Rapid growth in the civil aviation industry is an inevitable consequence of economic growth. But what we need to remember that the growth in the aviation industry also generates problems in its wake. And solutions have to be enforced through collaborative approach, and it is better to preempt the problems from arising rather than struggle to solve them after they have arisen. As for the issue of global warming, after the last conference on the subject, civil aviation has come under increasing pressure to cut emissions. And incidentally, the total emission of greenhouse gases, the contribution by civil aviation, I believe, is around 2%. So it's really not too much. But if just in India alone, if the air traffic management system were to prevent aircraft orbiting for half an hour before landing, I think we'll cut that 2% down to 1. And I think that is where your effort will help achieve success. Thank you again, David, for your presentation. Now to come to the next speaker, we have Mr. Rajshekhar Agarwal. He is a specialist in infrastructure development. He is right now the chairman of M Venture Projects Private Limited Singapore and is representing ASSOCHAM. In July 2003, he promoted Pragati 47 Development Limited and led the establishment in 2007 of Bengal Aerotropolis, that is Projects Limited or BAPL, which is in Durgapur. This project is in technical and financial collaboration with Changi Airport at Singapore. Mr. Agarwal has led the interaction and negotiations with Changi for this project. He conceptualized and promoted the Ludhiana International Aerotropolis project, and with the background of a chartered accountant and company secretary, he has led many organizations in his career so far. Today he is going to speak to us on aerospace manufacturing and its scope in India. I will share a few thoughts on this subject. Thank you.
One of the booming sectors in the Indian economy is the Indian civil aviation sector. Over the past decade, one can see a tremendous amount of changes. With the low-cost airlines have been a blessing for the Indian civil aviation sector, the airports have been upgraded around the country. Praful Patel was present for a 2-day seminar which has been organized in India Habitat Center, which deals that in coming years how airport traffic control management will deal with the air traffic around the country. He said that the world should know that the Indian skies are much safe and secure with trained ATC operators. This is Abhay Singh Raba reporting for SP Guide Publication.